Perfect. So, ja, herzlich willkommen alle zusammen, die an unserem AV over IP Meeting teilnehmen. Im Namen von syscomtec darf ich Sie begrüßen. Wir freuen uns, dass Sie, wie gesagt, teilnehmen. Mein Name ist Manuel Grimmer. Ich bin die Vertriebsleitung bei der syscomtec und wäre eben der kaufmännische Ansprechpartner. Rechts neben mir darf ich meinen Kollegen vorstellen, der Rudolf Huber, der ist unser technischer Leiter, der dementsprechend unterstützend tätig ist bei allen technischen Fragen. Und ich will jetzt einfach das Wort übergeben an unseren Lieferanten CYP, der heute so freundlich ist und uns sein AV over IP Einstiegssystem vorstellt. In Person von Dan von der kaufmännischen Abteilung und Kevin von der technischen Abteilung, genauso wie der Gegenpart, aber die Personen dürfen sich selbst vorstellen. So, Dan, please go ahead and start.
Thank you very kindly. Thank you kindly.
Good
afternoon, everyone. Nachmittag, I hope that's correct. Kevin and our German is not great, so we will speak in English. Any questions at any time, just ask, and Manuel and Rudy can help us get those answers across. So let's get started. So if you're not familiar...
Dan, sorry for interrupt you. Ein wichtiges Thema noch. Es wird in diesem Meeting keine Chat-Funktion geben, ganz bewusst nicht, weil wir möchten ganz gerne dieses Meeting interaktiv gestalten. Also sollten Sie eine Frage haben, dürfen Sie sie jederzeit stellen. An dieser Stelle, wo wir eben sind, dass das Thema einfach mit Leben gefüllt wird und nicht nur eine klassische Präsentation wird, sondern einfach, wie gesagt, ein normales Gespräch, das interaktiv ist, dass man sofort Fragen stellt. Das würden wir uns wünschen. Also von denen her jederzeit unterbrechen und Fragen stellen. Okay, Dan, sorry.
No problem. I understood questions in there. Ask questions. It's all good. My 5 or 6 words of German are coming in very handy. So, if you're not familiar with CYP, we are known mostly for signal distribution and signal management. And today we'll be looking at 1 gig AV over IP.
And hopefully no more for the rest of this day.
Let's start with an overview. So as it says here, the future is here. It's called AV over IP. So what is AV over IP? It's the distribution of digital video and audio and control across an IP network. And we're seeing this used a lot more in modern times with a lot of applications. So what is it doing? It's converging video, audio, power over Ethernet or PoE, control signals, and USB functionality, all across a 1 gig network switch.
You just knock it into his hands.
If we look, Kev, would you like to just briefly explain roughly where the 1 gig system fits in terms of these features on screen?
Yeah, well, what we've got there is just a little codec comparison chart. So you've got sort of traditional H.264, H.265 systems, which are really low bandwidth, but the quality is not very good. And the latency is not very good, and the signal to noise ratio is not very good, but they have a place. If you've only got Cat5 cabling infrastructures, or you've got a low bandwidth IP network, then they still have a place. And then right at the other end, you've got the SDVoE equipment, which is based on a 10 gigabit network system. So obviously the bandwidth is massive. The signal quality is really high. You know, it's as close to native as you can get. And sitting in the middle there is the IP equipment we're talking about today. This is based on a Motion JPEG, but actually it's the chip manufacturer is ASpeed, and they have a patented compression technology, which is within the Motion JPEG frame, but actually it's a unique compression codec developed by ASpeed, so it's only found on ASpeed product, and that's one of the advantages of this system. It's actually, as I said, it's patented, so no one else can use it. So the ASpeed chip, whilst it's based on Motion JPEG, the actual compression engines they're using to compress and decompress at either end are actually bespoke to the chipset. And as you can see from the chart, this system sort of sits nicely in the middle. You know, it's got a good bit of bandwidth that allows you to have good quality, even at some 4K signals. The latency is very, very good, sort of 16 to 33 milliseconds. That's dependent on the timing. So that the higher the resolution, basically, you lose a bit of latency there across there. And then the signal to noise, the peak signal to noise ratio is very good as well. I think the thing to remember with signal to noise ratio is that the higher the number, the higher it is away from the noise floor. So when you've got 45 dB, you're quite a way away from the noise floor. And even video will have a noise floor. I know with audio you can sometimes hear the noise floor, but video has a noise floor as well. So that can create artifacting if the amount of decibels that the system's pushing through is not high enough to get it away from the noisy floor at the bottom of the system. So it's a very good system. It kind of is a compromise between trying to get the best latency, the best bandwidth, and the best signal to noise ratio across a 1 GB network system.
Super. Thank you, Kev. So let's have a look at some key features of the AV over IP system. So flexibility and scalability. I'm very tempted here to read all the German words, but I'm going to stick to the English words for now. So flexibility and scalability. With an AV over IP system, at any time you can add additional transmitters or add additional receivers to make the system bigger and more custom for the application. So flexibility, scalability. We have our IP-CS7 controller with a simple drag and drop interface. So it's very easy for the end user to use. And simplicity. The controller, seen here, the controller has a full setup wizard. So it will guide the installer through how to set up and configure the complete AV over IP system. Let's have a look at the hardware. So on the left-hand side, you see the IP-7000 transmitter. And this has the VGA in and HDMI in, as well as some other connectivity. And then on the right-hand side, you have the IP-7000 receiver, the RX. And that, as we've shown here, has the HDMI output, VGA output, and also then the USB connectivity as well for things like keyboard and mouse or interactive display. Soon as well. Yes, Dan, carry on.
I have the first question. I saw you wrote it support PoE. Is that the standard PoE or PoE plus?
Oh, good question. Kev?
The standard 802.3 AF. So it's the lower wattage PoE system. So theoretically, it will work with pretty much any PoE. But yeah, but it's the 802.3 AF standard, which is the original PoE standard. So it doesn't need, these don't need a great deal of power. It's very rare that if you get a 24-port switch that you're going to run out of power. Admittedly, you do have to just make sure when you're getting a PoE switch, you just look at the watts that are provided to the PoE and make sure you can power everything that's in your system. Obviously the watts and stuff for each one used PoE are written in the manual, so you can make these calculations. But yeah, most of the standard ones from all the well-known switch manufacturers are all absolutely fine. We've stacked them full of kit and we still be able to get the PoE no problem.
Okay, and the port, the USB 2.0 standard also the full bandwidth, the 480 megabits?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly, as far as the chip manufacturer is concerned, yes, the input and the two labeled USB 2 will go up to that level. Now, obviously, you've got a maximum bandwidth for the network switches 1 gig in port. So it really does depend exactly what all the streams, what the bandwidth are of your video stream, your audio stream, your LAN stream, your USB stream. So, you know, it can go up to 400, but in practice, you're probably going to get a little bit less, especially if you're using like a 4K 30 hertz video input, because the TX has to manage the overall bandwidth to make sure it doesn't push out more than 1 gig that the network switch input can handle. This is also kind of related to the LAN as well, because the LAN is listed as you know, as 100 megabits per second, so 1 gig. But obviously, unless you're not using any of the streams, you can't possibly get the full 1 gig, because the video is using 500 and this is using that and that is using that. So whilst all of like the USB is listed as 2.0 maximum, the LAN is listed as 1 gig maximum, the realities of what you get, those are just maximums. The realities of what you are actually going to get will depend on what bandwidth you're using on each of the individual streams that are going from the TX to the network switch and then back out to the RX.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Super.
I have a question too.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Is it only HDMI 1.4 or the other versions?
HDMI 1.4 as far as the support goes, yes. These are 1 gig systems, so they will not do 4K 60 or 4K HDR.
And it's standard dynamic range also.
Yes.
And chroma subsampling 420.
It will accept 4K 5060 420, yes. Actually, the reality is that's eating a lot of bandwidth when you're doing that. But yeah, you can put that in; it will come out the other side. As I say, you know what you've got to remember here is the network switch only has 1 gig in, so the TX has to manage all of the streams to make sure that what it's outputting is not beyond 1 gig. So when you go up to those higher those higher video resolutions that are supported, what you must realize is you might not get so much bandwidth from your LAN or your USB as well.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Super. And soon we will be releasing, as well as the standard transmitter and standard receiver, we will be releasing a wall plate version of the transmitter. So the IP-7000 TX wall plate, and this will be coming later this year to add to the range.
The hardware's done on this. It's just a matter of converging the firmwares so they all work with the controller correctly.
Perfect.
I'm hoping in the fourth quarter this year this will be available.
Super. Excellent. Right, let's have a look at a matrix application using this system. So multiple transmitters to multiple receivers, obviously. The IP-CS7 will give its drag and drop interface, and it's simple to grow the size of the system as you need to. So of course, a 1 gig network switch, that would either be a layer 3 switch or a managed layer 2 switch. The transmitters connected in, of course. Receivers connected into the network switch as well. And then you'd have the CS7 controller, that's the CYP CS7 controller, and you could connect that directly to a local touchscreen, or there's other ways to control it as well. So that
I mean, everything's got telnet commands, so you can send commands from anywhere, either telnet into the controller to manage the switchings remotely. So you can use the web GUI, you can use telnet, you can do RS-232, but actually on the controller you have this direct HDMI output and this direct USB output, which are very common, certainly in commercial applications, that you connect those to a touch screen, and then you just have simple drag and drop control, which we'll talk about as we go through.
Perfect. So that would be a simple matrix solution. And we're finding that you can see here, this does all use the standard routable Ethernet packets of the network switch. And we're seeing this common in places like retail for signage, meeting room spaces, but also then used as matrix or for just standard distribution systems. And to look at that as an application, you might have one transmitter to many receivers, and that would use one of our transmitter models fed out to a receiver, and then you can daisy chain to other receivers from there. So one signal to many receivers.
So that's a distribution system. So in that system, and you can do this with the IP product, in that system you're not using the IP-CS7 because you've just got a single source to multiple receivers. So the two additional ports on the receivers allow you to just make a bridge and bridge it through and create a massive distribution network. Very useful because also the distance between the first RX and the next RX and so on and so on and so on can be another 100 meters. So it's very useful for that thing. But do remember, you're not connecting to a network switch here, so you're going to need all the power supplies to power the units.
That's right.
In a distribution system like that.
Perfect, perfect. So let's have a look at a case study showing this system in operation. So this is a popular sports bar in London, and it has around 30 screens around this property. As you can see here, you have the control interface on a touch screen when you walk into this sports bar, and then as you can see, screens located all around the property, including video wall and LED walls. And again, just an idea of the simple setup. So of course, IP-7000 transmitters with all of the sources, all connected into the network switch, along with the CS7 controller. And then of course, all of your receivers all the way around that property. And this is just an idea from the top of that system. And again, you've got that touch screen here for use with the drag and drop control. And this is exactly how that drag and drop works. So this is an image of our control interface, and this is called the monitor and control page. And you simply have transmitters on the left, receivers on the right, and you drag and drop your transmitter to your receiver and then see the content. It's that simple. Drag and drop from transmitter to receiver. And all of these images here will come up as a moving image. Every couple of seconds, the image will change to show you what you're looking at. So this one would be showing you a clip every now and again of the football. That one there is a news channel. You get the idea. So that's the simple drag and drop interface of our CS7 controller. This is again showing that system in action. So you see here, you've now got more transmitters, which in this case are sports channels from satellite TV. And then all of the receivers or screens are showing on the right-hand side there. So again, this is in a sports bar. So the staff will simply move the content from one transmitter to an area of the sports bar. Really, really simple to use.
You get up different, in the receiver area, you also get your groups and any video walls you've set up as well coming in that group. So anything you set up which has basically got a receiver on it can be mapped into that receiver area. Also, you can order all the receivers and the transmitters, if you like, because obviously if you are using this system either from the direct HDMI and USB output from the controller, or just from logging onto the controller's IP address via web GUI, you might want to order the RXs in the order of they're most likely to be used, so that they appear at the top. So you can reorder all of these as well, so that suits your installation.
Exactly right. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Kev. And you will see on the top left-hand side there, you can add in a logo. So if you are installing this for a customer called Joe Blogs Restaurants, you could have a logo here that says Joe Blogs Restaurants. So you can add that in to the control interface. So a bit of branding there, put your logo into the system. As well as AV over IP, in this example, in this case study, they used an HD-Base-T transmitter wall plate to integrate into the larger system. And that would allow them, obviously, maybe a laptop or something external could be plugged into the system. As I mentioned earlier, we will be releasing an AV over IP wall plate soon. So this could then just be a standard, an AV over IP wall plate instead.
In this pub, they've got a couple of zones that are set up almost like a boardroom. So you've got like a separate area, which has got a separate audio for it and a separate screen for it. And the idea is that at the edge of the table, there's a plate, and people can come in and do presentations at the pub. It's in Docklands, the sort of financial area of London. So often you have a business lunch that might use this. So that's why this has been integrated into it.
Fantastic. And on the right-hand side of the screen there, you can see this being used with a video wall. So let's have a look at using it with video wall functions. So all you would do for a video wall is have one receiver per screen in your video wall, as you see here. And then you can set up in our IP-CS7 controller, you can set up those receivers as a video wall group. And as it says here, save that as a video wall group. And once you've saved it, as Kevin mentioned, your video wall will then show up in this receiver part of the monitor and control. So if you take a transmitter here and you drag that to a video wall, then the video wall will then display that single content. So really simple to set up and then really simple to use, because it will show up in this receiver side of the monitor and control section. And that's all done using the controller and the standard receivers. There's no additional hardware required to build a video wall.
Perfect.
Oh, and there we go, drag and drop.
Very snazzy.
Very snazzy. PowerPoint for the win. It's great. This one's a bit more confusing to Manuel and Rudy. Please feel free to express this clearer afterwards. But if you would like to use the system, so one large AV over IP system, but with independent zones, you can do that now thanks to our user login features. So as an example, if this were 5 different meeting rooms, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meeting rooms, you could have a separate login for each meeting room space. And those logins could give you access to certain receivers and certain transmitters. So zone 1, you might log in as username 1, use password 1, zone 1. And the administrator would have allowed you access to selected transmitters, in this case transmitter 1, transmitter 2, and because you're in meeting room 1, you only have access to receiver 1, the local screen in this meeting room space. And the administrator might have said you don't have access to any settings. That will obviously stop the end user from changing the settings in that zone. And this can be set up over every single zone. So when you walk into zone 1, you see, for example, a little controller like this, maybe an Android PoE controller of some sort. And this would only show you the transmitters available in zone 1 and the receivers available in zone 1, and that could be across every single room. As an administrator, you could have access to every transmitter, every receiver, and all of the settings. And this can be custom done for every single login and every single zone. Would you like to explain that a little bit more, Manuel, Rudy, or are you happy with that overall?
We are good. So no questions from our side. Any questions from our customers? Haben Sie irgendwelche Fragen? Nein? Then, okay, go ahead.
The thing to remember is it just allows you, and this is the beauty of it, allows you to have one big system in a commercial building, commercial premises, that you're creating sub-zones for. And each zone, as far as the user of that zone is concerned, feels like a different system. But actually, it's all one big system where you've just subdivided it. So the advantage of this is if you wanted to create a zone area and you opened all the doors between zone 2, 3, 4, and 4, you could actually open all that up and create another user that was zones 2 to 5. And that would be one user still. So it just allows you to create and have users use individual sections of the IP, the larger IP system.
Exactly right. Yeah, and you've said before, Kev, it is easy to set up, isn't it? It's easy to set up, easy to use.
Yeah, I mean the only thing that changes as far as the fundamentals of the web GUI is that once you set up users, you have to then log in, whether it's a user login or an administrator login, in order to get to the monitor and control page. When you haven't got users set up, as soon as you go to the web GUI, either directly or through an IP address portal, you will always allow access to the monitor and control drag and drop page and the presets page. But as soon as you do users, obviously the system needs to know what user you are, so it knows what zone you're in, so that it can give you the TX and RXs that have been mapped to your zone. And as far as the PoE Android devices are concerned, it's a very good little way of doing it. I mean, we usually use just a PoE Android tablet, and basically you can just get a windowless browser, tell the Android device to boot the windowless browser on boot up, get a default IP address, which is the CS7's IP address. You can even get it to remember and save, if it's the right type of browser, you can save the username and password for that zone. So basically, when the system's turned on in the morning, the Android tab can basically boot up, go to the web GUI, log you in, and it's just sitting there waiting for the user to come in and go, right, we want to do this. And it's very easy to set up. I'm sure that syscomtec, you've done similar things with for different systems with PoE, or well, with Android-based touchscreens as well. So it's very similar to that. It's not complex.
Perfect. Thank you, Kev. In fact, I'll hand over to Kev. Do you want to quickly go through some of the basics of the GUI?
Yeah, conscious of time, but we'll do so. So, so this is version 2 of a big revision of the firmware for this controller. So in the bottom right-hand corner there, you have the CYP logo and the cog icon. This takes you to the system settings page. So if you need to make any system settings page, you need to do it there. But remember, you need to be logged in as an administrator. So a normal user, unless the administrator has given them rights to do so, cannot see that monitoring that system settings, so they can't make any changes. So in the monitor control page there, that just lists all your TXs on the right hand side and all your RXs and any groups or video walls you've created, and then you can drag and drop between them. It's very, very simple. I'm sure you've seen it before. So as we move through, you've got then preset recalls. So again, if you just want to set up, if it's like the example of the pub and restaurant we saw earlier, so they have a couple of presets that allow them for various settings, like a preset in the morning that just randomly puts different things on the TV, and then a preset for showing like 2 sports channels, 3 sports channels across all the screens in the bars. So it's just useful for presets for defaulting TXs to certain RXs. Very simple to use, again, very easy to set up. And then as we go through, you've got settings. So in the settings, this is where you set up your video walls or your groups. So you can set that up there. So all your presets, video walls, groups are set up there. Again, they're very simple to set up. It's, you know, pretty much a drag and drop and select your TXs and RXs. And then we get to the devices. Now, the devices is a slightly more complicated area. So straight away there, you can see that you've got a group of drop downs which represent all the actual streams that are going on. So you've got the video stream, the audio stream, the USB stream, the IR stream, and the serial stream. You can actually make changes from here, but this is generally just for viewing and for making adaptations when you're building the system. So when you click the drop down menu, everything that's there will just be there, and you can make changes and it will go on the fly. So you can check a system from here very easily. You can check various things. But within that as well, you also get the replace, remove, and the sorting function. So these are just functions that allow you to remove a TX or RX from the system, or if you think you've got a problem with it and you want to replace it, you can replace it. So it's just a step-by-step procedure. This one's going in, this one's coming out. That's all done. And then the sorting. So the sorting relates to the order that each TX and RX appears on the monitor and control page. You remember I said earlier you can sort them into a different order? So this is just for that. Also, if you are using a third-party control system, please do on this page hit for the TX and the RX, hit the sorting button, bring up the page and just click OK, because until you've done that, the CS7 doesn't know what order they're in. So you don't actually have to make any changes, and you don't need to do it unless you're using a third-party control system. But then they'll just tell it what order everything is. So when you're saying to the CS7, hey, make RX7 look at TX1, it knows that order. Okay. And then finally on this page, you've got the information section. So this is dragging in every single bit of functionality that the TX or the RX can do. So in this one, for example, you've got this is the RX. So you've got the system settings at the top there. So, oh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah. So we have the hello function. So the hello function is just a way of, on the transmitter or receiver, you can turn this function on, and on the transmitter, you'll get the LEDs at the front of the transmitter flashing at you. This just helps to identify the unit that you're actually looking at and referencing. So on the RX, you get the same thing. The LEDs flash at you, but also on the screen, because we think that, you know, the RX might be behind the screen, you might be able to see it. The screen will actually bring up a little hi or hello logo, written text at the top left-hand side. So very good for just helping you to identify and label your transmitters and receivers. And then you have the name, where you can name it. You have the kernel version and the application version. So the kernel version is the firmware that is running on the chip inside, and the application version is the CYP firmware for the physical product. And then you've just got a reboot and a factory default. Moving across, you've got the IP set up, so the MAC address, IP mode, and IP addresses details. So all the units will ship in auto IP. The idea here is that you don't need to set up your network switch for DHCP unless you want to. So auto IP will always return a 169.254, and it means that the units will give themselves an IP address and don't have to rely on the network switch giving out that address. It works beautifully in this system, and you never get any conflicts. But if you do have a DHCP server, or you do want to change it to a particular static address, you can just drop that down, change it, and make those changes yourself. And then you have the video over IP. So you've got an enable, channel, and casting mode. So let's look at those first. So obviously, enable the video over IP is just saying, hey, I want this stream active. And then the channel number. So for RXs, the channel number just represents what TX channel they are looking at. So it's just telling you that this RX, let's call it RX1, is actually looking at channel 1. So it just tells you what stream is coming in. And then you've got multicast and unicast. So in any system that's got more than one transmitter, you will always be in multicast. And then you have the scaling options. So each RX has a built-in scaler, and there are many, many, many different scaling options available. So you can check that, check your screen resolution or your projector resolution, and check the most appropriate timing that's more appropriate for the screen you're connected to. So through that, you can copy the EDID from a screen. So if you want to always have that EDID, you can copy it in there. And you can also got some automation of turning the screen on and off if that function is available on the screen. And then like at the bottom there, you have video select lock buttons. So this is basically means that the buttons on the front of the, in this case RX, do not function. So if they're in view where someone could touch them and change the channel number, for example, which will change what you're watching, you can actually lock those so they're no longer active. And then you've got the different streams at the bottom. So you've got serial over IP, so there you can just set up your baud rate. USB over IP, so you've got an on and you've got an auto select mode. And then you have a compatibility mode there, the keyboard and mouse over IP. So if you're using a keyboard and mouse and it's either having some problems, or maybe you're using a touch screen that doesn't seem to be quite perfectly working, just tick that box and it will attempt to improve that. It's generally with touchscreens. I've found generally I've not really had to use it, but it is useful in case you do have a problem. It puts the USB in a more compatible mode for keyboard, mouses, and touchscreens. Video wall there, that is just a reference really. It's just telling you, is this in a video wall? So is this RX in a video wall? So when you've got 1111, you can tell it's not in a video wall. So it helps as a reference. And then a really important bit at the end, the free routing bit. So this is all about whether you want a particular stream to not move from its TX RX setting when you use the drag and drop in the monitor and control section. So a classic example of this is I have a projector at RX1 that is being controlled from TX1 by RS232. So I set TX1 to RX1, and I then go into RX1 and I turn off enable serial. So this means that you have now locked the serial, the RS232 bus, from TX1 to RX1. And whenever your customer or you or anybody makes a change with the drag and drop or a telnet command to change the RX to a different TX, that serial RS232 bus stays TX1 to RX1, even if the video, audio, USB, and IR are now looking at TX7. So it's a really useful way of locking down one particular stream element of the system. It's also used sometimes for locking audio. So if you always want audio from the radio, but you're switching the video around, you can untick it. So again, it's a very, very useful bit of functionality.
Perfect. Let's move on to the TX, I think.
Yeah, the TX is essentially very, very similar. So you can see there that the system IP setup, serial and USB are the same. So the video over IP. So this is where on the TX the channel number is important. Each TX needs to be on a separate channel. So think of it as if you try to tune in to two TV channels at the same time. So if you've got two TXs on the same channel, channel 1 for example, when the RX tries to grab that channel, it's getting two streams. So you always must make sure that every TX in the system is on its own channel number. A practical tip for installation is don't use channel 0. The reason why is because when you put a new TX in the system, it always defaults to channel 0. So if your customer wants you to add a TX and you've used channel 0, when you add it, it will default to channel 0, and if someone's watching it, then suddenly you'll get 2 streams trying to work together in a mess on the screen. So just a practical tip there. When I'm building a system, I always start from 1 and leave channel 0. So when I put in another TX, it doesn't mess up the system that's already running. And then you have your multicast modes again. And then you have the switch mode. So the switch mode is just simply what video input are we looking at here? Are we looking at the VGA or the HDMI? And then we have maximum bit rate and maximum frame rate. So this is a way of managing the overall bandwidth of the transmitter that's in use. So with it set to unlimited and 100% frame rate, then you're getting the full quality of the video encoded and decoded. But if, for example, you've got quite a static screen and you're trying to just, it's just a scoreboard of some description, you could actually turn that maximum frame rate down, which would allow you, for example, to get faster USB and faster LAN serving because the video is no longer taking up so much bandwidth.
Superb.
So moving across, so this is now the system settings page. So here, that's thank you, Dan. That's under the icon cog. So you have some downloads. So the settings download is if you've got a configuration that you want to save, perhaps you're doing a similar installation, or more importantly, you just want to save it in case you need to come back later. You can just download the system data there, and you can see underneath that you've got a settings upload. So this allows you to just download and upload system settings. And then we have 2 icon-based settings. So the favicon is the little small icon you see in every tab of a web page. So if you want to change that little icon to something that's more appropriate, if you're logging onto this through the IP address, then you can do it there. And then we have the logo. So you see it here, we have in the bottom right, we have our CYP logo and our cog icon. And then at the top left, we have another CYP logo. So this CYP logo at the top left, this can be replaced. So if you're using the direct HDMI output and USB for control, and it's going to a touch panel or something similar, and you'd like to put your customer's logo or customer's details there, you can just upload a new icon there and it will appear. Quite a useful little function. And then we go over to the LAN settings, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
So the CS7 has 2 independent LANs. So the idea here is because this is a 1 gig network system, the gigabit switches are no longer expensive in any way. They're really, really quite cheap. And so the idea is that LAN 1, which is your PoE connection for the CS7, this connects to your video over IP network. And then LAN 2, you connect to the wider networking so that you can access the IP-CS7 from your normal work network. Again, a lot of the time this can be used in installations to bridge the gap and allow a third-party control system that's connected to a different network system, like the normal network system, to bridge that gap so it can still talk to the CS7 and the CS7 can still talk to the rest of the system.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. So then you've just got simply here now, we'll just go through, we've got logging in, logging out, changing of passwords, defaulting units, reboots, and restart screen. Restart screen is if you think that the web browser on one of the, so you're looking through the IP address, the web browser, something's maybe gone wrong with it, so you can, that's like a forced refresh for the web browser. And then we have the wizard. So the wizard, as Dan mentioned, is just a way of going through the system setup very easy. So it will find all your TXs, find all your RXs, ask you whether you want presets, macros, video walls, and it's a very, very useful function, especially the first few times you actually use the system. If I'm completely honest, once you're used to using this system, you don't have to use it. I haven't used it for years because also, as soon as you connect everything and power it all on, the system will auto-propagate all the TXs and RXs. So everything you can do in the wizard, you can do from the web GUI anyway. The wizard just allows you the first few times you use it to try and get used to how the system operates. So it's a very, very nice way of just getting used to how the system works. And then we have the user settings there. So this user settings, this is where you set up all the different users for the different zones we were talking about earlier. So zone 1, username zone 1, password Dave, you know, and so all of that is just set up. One thing to remember when you're setting up users is what you need to do is, if you need to use presets, groups, and video walls in an individual user, log in as the administrator, set up the user, and allow them to have system setting changes. Allow them to make system setting changes. Then you log in as that user, you create your video wall, you create your presets, you create your groups. Then you come out, log back in as the administrator, and remove the system settings preferences to allow them to do it. So now you've got all the groups, presets, and video walls set up for that particular zone, but the user now who logs in can't see all the system settings. So again, quite a practical way forward. And then down the bottom there, we've got firmware versions. So it allows you to update the TXs and the RXs and the controller itself directly from the CS7's webpage.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kev. Just quickly, I know we're a bit short for time, so just to say, this system and from the case study we looked at earlier can all be housed in our RACS 600 system. So these units here are the IP-7000 transmitters, and they fit straight in. If you have smaller devices, you can fit them in with our blanking trays. So this will all fit into a standard 19-inch rack enclosure with our RACS 600. We do then have separate power managers available for this RACS series as well, with things like timers built in. And then you do actually have the RACS fan, which again could just fit in straight into the rack system, allowing you to house your IP-7000 transmitters, as you see here on screen. Just to quickly summarize them, we're pretty much done. As we spoke about earlier, if you need more bandwidth, you are looking for things like 4K 60 support, then you may well look at the SDVoE series that we offer, which is then a 10 gig AV over IP system. So as you see here, the bandwidth is higher, the latency is lower, so it's a quicker system, lower latency.
Tiny on that system.
Exactly. And it can then handle 4K 60. Yeah. And you've said before, Kev, because the bandwidth is higher, everything is slightly better, isn't it, including the image quality, etc.
Yeah, you got more bandwidth, so the image quality is pretty much flawless. You know, at lower resolutions, there's no compression at all, and at the highest 4K resolutions, the compression is very light, and really the picture quality is absolutely superb.
Fantastic. And we are looking to work with syscomtec probably around maybe September time to offer some more information on the SDVoE system, to go through something like today, but with SDVoE. And those models are available as fiber or CAT.
So yeah, Dan, thanks for this information about the SDVoE system. Ja, wir planen natürlich, diese Serie fortzusetzen, was AV over IP betrifft. Heute war der Anfang mit den 1-Gig-Systemen. Nach den Sommerferien geht es weiter. Mitte September wird es dann das weitere Meeting geben mit dieser SDVoE-Lösung. Da würden wir uns natürlich wieder freuen, wenn wir Sie wieder alle begrüßen dürfen. Und ja, von denen her, Dan, you have additional site or you're gone?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Just saying there are some additional videos on our YouTube channel, the CYP Europe YouTube channel. And obviously you guys at syscomtec, you know, any questions that your customers have, feel free to raise them with you guys. And then obviously you know, you've always got our support this end as well. So yeah, on behalf of Kevin and myself, thank you for joining us. And any questions, do feel free to put them to us. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining today. Really good to see you all here. I hope everything is good with you and your families. Dan, Kev, thanks so much for the time.
auch von unserer Seite, von syscomtec, vielen Dank für die Zeit, fürs Zuhören. Für Fragen stehen wir natürlich jederzeit zur Verfügung. Im Nachgang des Meetings werden wir jeden nochmal individuell anschreiben mit allgemeinen Informationen und somit haben wir die Chance, einfach das Gespräch zu vertiefen, wenn es Fragen gibt. Vielen Dank von unserer Seite. Ciao.
Wonderful. Thank you. Auf Wiedersehen. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Cheers, Manuel. Cheers, Rudy.
Bye-bye.
Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you soon, Dan.
Yeah, speak to you soon, Kev.
Bye, buddy.